Sometime in the bruised glow of a Georgia evening, Grace Sullivan stepped onto the collapsing porch of Willow Creek Estate, feeling the warped planks tremble beneath her as if the house were waking from a century-long slumber. The air seemed to thicken, humming with a presence she couldn't name. Then, without a touch, the heavy oak door drifted inward, opening with a groan that rolled through the foyer like an old secret being exhaled for the first time in decades. Dust spiraled lazily in the fading light, catching the warmth of the setting sun and dissolving into shimmering ghosts. Emma stood behind her, gripping her backpack straps, her voice trembling with awe. "Mom, it feels like it knows us." Grace didn't dismiss it. She couldn't. Something about this place pressed against her ribs, as if reaching for something buried in her bones. And then from the dark along the second-floor landing came the unmistakable sound of small footsteps followed by a soft, faraway laugh. Not threatening, not mocking, just impossibly familiar. Grace stepped inside, and the door closed behind them as if sealing their names into its history. Just weeks before that moment, Grace had sat alone in her cramped Portland apartment, surrounded by the quiet wreckage of a life falling apart too fast. Past due notices cluttered the coffee table. Her garage, her pride, her legacy, her survival was failing. And the empty recliner where her father, Samuel, used to sit still held the shape of someone she couldn't bear to live without. His brass pocket watch, engraved with a 5-pointed star, had refused to tick since the moment his heart stopped. One night, with exhaustion and fear pooling behind her eyes, she found herself scrolling through an online property auction. When Willow Creek appeared on her screen, something deep inside her jolted awake. The peeling white columns, the shattered windows, the overgrown grounds, it should have repelled her. Instead, she felt pulled toward it with unsettling force. Emma peeked over her shoulder and whispered, "Mom, that house is calling us." Grace didn't believe in signs. She believed in engines, tools, and what her hands could fix. But she placed the bid anyway. When the confirmation email came, naming her the new owner of a forgotten southern mansion, she felt a whisper in her chest that didn't feel like imagination. It felt like blood remembering. The morning after their arrival, sunlight slid through fractured shutters and exposed something far more unnerving than chipped paint and sagging beams. Carved into every doorway and window frame were symbols, stars, looping knots, intertwined circles, etched with the precision of someone performing a ritual rather than simple decoration. Grace brushed her fingertips across one symbol and froze. A 5-pointed star inside a circle, the exact emblem engraved on Samuel's pocket watch. The moment she touched it, the long-dead watch ticked once in her pocket, a single heartbeat of metal and memory. Emma, meanwhile, explored the mansion with the ease of a child in a place she somehow already understood. She told Grace about the girl she'd seen upstairs, a girl in a blue dress with braided hair and eyes full of secrets. "Her name is Lily," Emma said. "She used to live here. She died a long time ago, but she still plays here." Grace tried to keep her voice steady, but when Emma added, "She says our family used to live here too," Grace's breath hitched. How could a ghost child know something even she did? That night, long after Emma fell asleep, Grace lay awake listening to the house whisper. A board creaked in the hallway, not randomly but rhythmically, as if footsteps moved with purpose. She rose, flashlight in hand, following the sound toward the old library. The door that had swollen shut earlier now hung open as if waiting for her. Inside, dust lay thick on the floor, except for a faint path leading behind a row of tall shelves. Grace pressed her hand to the wood, and the entire bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow passage exhaling cold, stale air. She followed the tunnel downward, her light flickering over brick walls and forgotten spider webs. At the end was a chamber lined with crates, ledgers, and yellowing papers. But what stopped her breath was a faded photograph resting atop an old trunk. The Haywood family posed in front of the mansion, stiff and polished, and behind them stood the servants, black men and women in uniform. On the far right stood a man with Samuel's unmistakable eyes and bone structure. The back of the photograph listed the staff names. Among them, Grace Sullivan, her great-great-grandmother. The house hadn't been calling to her by coincidence. It had been calling blood home. Grace spent the next days immersed in Eleanor's diary, reading page after page of a voice reaching through a century. She learned the truth the Haywoods had hidden, how they forged deeds, stole land from black families after the Civil War, and built their wealth on exploitation and silence. Eleanor and her partner, George, had discovered the truth and secretly gathered evidence to expose them. Lily, the mysterious child Emma saw, became the bridge between past and present, whispering secrets no living soul could know. With Lily's guidance, Emma found a tarnished key hidden behind a loose brick in the kitchen fireplace. That key fit perfectly into a nearly invisible panel behind an upstairs wardrobe. Inside, Grace discovered the silent room, iron filing cabinets stuffed with original deeds the Haywoods had stolen, journals detailing their crimes, and a massive board covered in signatures. At the bottom were two names written in bold, certain strokes, Grace Sullivan and George Sullivan. Her ancestors had reclaimed the estate in 1919. Their legacy wasn't abandonment, it was victory. And Grace, unknowingly, had returned to finish what they began. Days later, an elderly man in a tailored suit arrived unannounced, leaning on a silver-handled cane. "William Haywood," he introduced himself, voice sharp as glass. He claimed the house had been wrongfully sold, that he was the rightful heir, and that Grace needed to vacate immediately. He spread rumors, brought lawyers, and tried to intimidate her into leaving. But Daniel Caldwell, the local contractor who had been quietly helping Grace with repairs, stood firmly at her side. Together they combed through county records, uncovering the truth William desperately tried to bury. He was not a Haywood by blood. He had been adopted into a distant branch of the family, his true ancestry traced back to the estate's former staff. When Grace confronted him with documents from the silent room, William's face broke open with grief and disbelief. Everything he thought he was, every piece of identity he'd fought to protect, crumbled. Instead of fighting, he surrendered. He funded a scholarship in honor of Willow Creek's original workers and stepped back, no longer clinging to a stolen legacy. As months passed, Willow Creek seemed to inhale life with every board replaced and every truth uncovered. Daniel organized volunteers who came eager to help restore a place that carried such deep, reclaimed history. The porch was rebuilt, the grand staircase reinforced, and the silent room transformed into a small museum, a space honoring the courage of Eleanor, George, and the community who had stood against lies a century earlier. Emma blossomed into a confident storyteller, guiding curious visitors through the mansion, sharing Lily's whispered memories like threads tying the past to the present. And Lily, slowly, gently, she faded, her presence softening like a candle burning low. "She doesn't need to stay now," Emma said one quiet night. "She said she was waiting for us to remember." On the anniversary of their arrival, descendants of the estate's original workers gathered beneath lanterns glowing in the garden. Grace read Eleanor's final diary entry aloud. "We stay, we endure, we remember, and one day our blood will return." And in that moment, surrounded by warm faces and old stories, Grace understood she had fulfilled a promise she never knew was hers. Later that night, Grace sat on the restored porch swing, listening to crickets humming in the dark as fireflies floated like sparks rising from the earth. The mansion behind her glowed with a soft, welcoming warmth, no longer a relic of pain, but a place reclaimed and reborn. Daniel joined her, setting a warm mug in her hands, their shoulders brushing in a way that felt steady and familiar. Grace looked around at the house her ancestors once fought to protect, the house that had called her across states and sorrow to return home. She had come seeking survival and found identity, truth, and legacy instead. Willow Creek wasn't haunted, it was hallowed. And it had been waiting for her. If this story moved you, if you felt the heartbeat of history in these walls, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more cinematic journeys into forgotten places and the secrets they hold. And before you go, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are right now?